What's up? Welcome to a new episode of Movie Schmovie. This is episode number 332. My name's Steve. I'm one of the co-hosts, and as always, I'm joined by
Ron
and John.
I feel like it's like a roulette wheel. Like I'm waiting to see how Ronald starts the pickup. When I leave that breath there, it's just like Ron.
Yeah, I've been told that I sound a little robotic when I say my name and also when I say hello, because people don't say hello, because they just say hey or hi, and I say hello, and they're like, "Are you a robot?"
Well, now that I've seen Ron's gone wrong, and every time you say like Ron, I'm just like, is he glitching like the robot? You know what I mean? Like he's glitching right now with me, or what's
every time
here?
I see Ronald, I slide 9 pictures across the table to him, and I say, pick the ones that have a motorcycle in them. And if he fails that test, then one day I'm confident he's going to fail that test, and I'm going to know that he's Robo Ron.
So long.
Well, I sometimes worry that I'm going to forget to come in and say, and John, because I'm doing the same thing you're doing, Steve. I'm watching with such anticipation to see how Ronald does it that sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, I have something to do too. So one day it's
we're gonna both be staring at you like we're gonna be like, John,
right,
you're up.
What's John gonna do this time? Right.
Oh,
not say his name, I guess.
No one will ever know.
Right. So yeah, we're getting together tonight to talk about mainly Peacemaker finale aired, and we're gonna talk about that episode specifically, but the series, the season 1 as a whole. Now that they've announced the season 2 is coming. From James Gunn, and as a Max original. We're gonna just kind of mention some other stuff that we've seen over the past week at the end of the episode. But to start, have you guys seen any news items, trailers, anything you want to just kind of buzz through real quick to make sure everybody's aware of if it came out over the last week?
Well, there's a story that I don't know if it's a story that I would love. Ronald sent us this headline, a Kevin Feige quote, where he referred to the 22 movie cycle of the Marvel Cinematic Universe as having the final Avengers movie in it. I don't know how much he's saying final Avengers movie and how much he's saying final one we've seen so far, or if he's saying final one in the cycle of this story, because they've said elsewhere, who knows which characters would pop up in a future team. I think that by final, you might mean the last time we see those characters assembled. I really did not mean that. But I mean, the last time you see those characters gathered together in a movie and called the Avengers, I don't see that there's nothing in that quote that says they won't do another one in a few years. It's just as though he's saying, this is the story that we told over these movies,
Right.
But they've said as much as that they're not trying to build up to anything that big anytime soon. So anyway, I don't know what you guys thought, if that was actually news or if that's just Kevin Feige giving a quote that's not really describing anything specific.
I don't give a shit. That's where
I guess I don't either. Yeah.
No.
That's kind of where I'm at with it too.
And by that I mean I don't care. It's not that I don't care about what's happening in the cinematic universe. It's like,
you mean like either way.
That ship has sailed, and whatever comes out of this, any grouping of people, I don't know if I care if they're called the Avengers. I hope they're not called the Avengers. In fact, I actually, like comic books, like I think that Kevin Feige is looking at this as like runs of comic books. This is like the 20-year thing that we've known is done. And as you can see, like 50 people are being introduced to us, sometimes 3 or 4 at a time, which is very overwhelming, I got to tell you. But I think it's really cool. And if we come back to the Avengers at some point, I don't need them to have their own movie. I'm okay with whatever version of them coming and fighting.
I think that's a crucial point. A movie called The Avengers is different from a team called The Avengers. Right.
Yeah. So I'm okay with that. And I didn't mean that as like a disrespect to it. I just think that like, I think holding on to things that were great to me for the past 20 years, if that changes forms in this new run, which it seems to be, man, I'm okay with it. Yeah.
How many years is it really? It's 20 odd movies. It's how many years? It was 2008. Was that Iron Man?
Oh my God. Jesus,
so 14 years. That's 14. A lot of stuff crammed into a short period of time. But it feels like it's 30 years.
And as in the way that they're making stuff now with like What If and WandaVision and Loki, it feels like we're watching like years and years of content in a very short amount of time, which is
I think that's the key though, honestly. I think that's why probably what he's saying is probably accurate, but just it's a little ambiguous. And I think it's just because now that they're past that, what Ronald just said, I think is the key to it all, which is that there's just so many opportunities now to introduce stuff so much faster, in some ways so much more efficiently, maybe, in terms of like, needing to introduce a character and then kind of move on from it. With the whole Disney Plus of it all. And I mean, even their theatrical slate now that we're kind of like hopefully moving towards better days in this pandemic. But there's tons of stuff planned in both of those avenues of media. So I just think that like there's so many, in some ways it would be even harder to land something like Endgame, in this new environment because of how much is going on. And I don't think, and like you said, they've kind of said that they don't plan to, at least in the nearest future. And I don't think they need to. I think they need to find out what works the best, in terms of crossing over this TV and theatrical idea, and eventually have movies, MCU movies that eventually I have no doubt will only come out on Disney Plus. Just like HBO Max and Warner's are doing with their DC films, like some are coming out in the movies, some are exclusive to HBO Max. Like eventually Disney is probably going to do something like that with Marvel. When it gets to a point that some of these characters maybe don't need a theatrical release in terms of budgets and scope and whatnot, but I think it allows them just to kind of experiment a bit and see what works. And we'll probably won't know that for 4 or 5 more years, I think, because of what's going on with the series that they have on Disney Plus.
Right. So it's like if it is a fact and it is news, it really doesn't matter that much because it's not going to change. Exactly. And what you were saying, Ronald, about there doesn't need to be a movie called The Avengers. It's like there's comics, there's West Coast Avengers, there's the New Avengers, there's the Young Avengers. Yeah, right. They can use that name if they want to use that name. But the fact that they don't really need that name, and that in fact that name might even be confusing to an audience expecting old characters in it when it wouldn't be. But yeah, it really did seem like, oh, this is a headline that doesn't really affect anything except for some baseline understanding that maybe we thought they were planning what the next Avengers movie would be, and this sounds like they're not, or at least Kevin Feige's not going to casually drop it into a quote about something else. That's why it doesn't seem like news. I think the broader topic here is these news stories that are like, someone gives a little 5-minute interview and it becomes 70 news stories over the next couple days, the way they take every factoid and turn it into its own story.
And he understands it. He seems to understand that idea. And I think he speaks the way that he does.
He speaks in nuggets.
He speaks in nuggets. And it's, you can see it in his face sometimes, when he's getting to a piece of information that is relevant to us. You could tell that he kind of lights up. He's like, you know what? Blah, 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 blah,
Right.
So I'm super curious to see what that means. Like I said, there's no disrespect when I said I don't give a shit, but like,
no, I knew what you meant.
Somewhere Kevin Feige took his hat off and took a gasp when you said that, because he's obviously listening to this, so he's
listening to the live
insulted.
feed. I know that he does. I know that he does.
I think the only thing I wanted to mention, I think was something that popped up today. I think Ronald sent us. I think Ronald sent us the whole Stranger Things thing.
Yeah.
Just the idea that, they're kind of, and it's kind of interesting too. And I'm sure this is probably partly due to it's surely due to the pandemic, at least.
Yeah.
Especially in the Netflix model, because you're seeing it kind of happen like with Ozark right now, and Stranger Things basically acknowledging, which I had read like a rumor about this before, that like basically they're breaking the season 4 up into 2 different parts or 2 different volumes to basically come out, within a couple months of one another. I guess basically because it's not done, but they want to get it out and that kind of thing. Yeah. It's also interesting because, it comes back around to this topic of like, you can look at HBO and HBO Max and, this conversation around like dropping all the episodes at once versus a weekly thing. And we'll get into it more about Peacemaker when we get there. But like, it's interesting that they're doing that with these shows that are kind of the remainders of their like landmark shows.
Yeah.
And we talked about it a little bit on a couple episodes ago, where like what goes into Netflix's like top tier of shows when things like Ozark and Stranger Things are done their runs, which will be done within the next year or 2, basically. And, the idea of them breaking up these 2 episodes, final seasons, or penultimate season in the case of Stranger Things, it's like, is that not only a idea for it being a production delay or things like that, but possibly also to like just stretch out the conversation, over these properties? Because it kind of blows my mind. And admittedly, I haven't even started this first part of the Ozark season. And, which I can't believe I haven't come around to it yet. But when I think about show, right. And that's what I've heard. Like, I have no doubt that I'll enjoy it, but like, it's not even about the quality of it. I'm just saying, like, it's crazy to me that I'm almost forgetting because I don't hear people saying anything about it immediately. And on the opposite side of the coin is the idea of what I said before, with HBO specifically, really kind of driving home this idea of like the weekly episode, which HBO proper had done, but HBO Max is doing also for certain seasons of shows. And for Peacemaker specifically, they did. And it's just like the proof is there that, like, week over week, these shows are gaining viewers, whether it's Succession, Peacemaker, or a great example is actually Euphoria, which just had like one of its highest viewed episodes coming in opposite the Super Bowl, of season 2 of that show. And it's the thing where, like, week over week, you're just constantly seeing stuff about that show because you have to wait 2 months before you see what they have to say about this season.
Yeah.
So, I can't stop thinking about that when I see things like this with the Duffer Brothers announcing that this is going to be a broken apart. And, it's kind of framed again, like, it's taking a long time to get it done. And, COVID and things like that. I'm sure it's laced throughout that announcement. But God, man, I can't help but think that there's like not only an attempt to draw these out as long as possible, but like to say that the summer of 2022, you're going to be able to be talking about Stranger Things more than if they had all just come out in May when they're supposed to come out or whatever it is. You know what I mean? What do you guys think about that idea?
I told you so.
You told me so. You mean the weekly?
Yeah, man. Like, you remember what I was saying? Like, it's not that I don't think that the model that Netflix has of just dropping things in your lap is the most awful thing in the world. But there is something to be said about the way conversations work now.
Oh, like, totally agree.
If you want things to last, you have to start doing it like that. And when I was saying it, it was out of frustration because, like I said, I've had these situations where I've watched Stranger Things season 1, and then 6 months later, somebody's like, "Yo, I checked out this show called Stranger," and you're like, this is done. 15 shows have come out since this has happened. I'm just saying, when something's weekly, it gives you some time for somebody, online or somebody in a conversation to be like, "Hey, look, oh my God, are you watching Bel-Air? Are you watching Peacemaker?
Right.
Are you watching Kanye? Are you watching Kanye on Netflix, which is a weekly thing?" It's
did you watch or have you watched it yet? Which is different. It's like, are you involved in it? Are you in it?
Yes.
Are you hooked like me? Are you waiting for the next one like me? No, I feel like we've talked about this a lot, actually, kind of all of us agreeing that there's a big difference between, like, you kind of want it all in this selfish way. And I feel like Stranger Things is the show that I associate with the binge, that I actually feel like it's a binge show because everybody I know kind of gets it and then says, "I know what I'll be watching this weekend." Definitely. And then they watch it. And I think there is something kind of water coolery about that, about being able to get people all the way in a weekend, like a new movie or something, or like a good book, maybe, where you can sit down and you can just dive into it. But I think that we also have seen that there is that other model that works. I kept thinking about Better Call Saul while you were talking, Steve, and you too, Ronald, where it's like Better Call Saul is breaking up its final season, and it's April and July. So it's not splitting it up too much. They're not making you wait forever. It's really like once the first 6 spool out, it really will only be a month or something before the next 7 come out. Yeah. And it doesn't seem like that much of a crazy tactic. It's not like breaking apart by a year. I think Breaking Bad's last season was split apart, and it was like 8 episodes and then a year and then the final 8. Right. And I think other shows have had that final half season that was way spaced out. Sopranos did that, I believe, with its last season. It was split into parts. So I think that there are ways that it doesn't feel like too much of like a marketing thing or a it's due to like not being able to finish in time or whatever. And sometimes it's like you hear about the salary negotiations, and that if they called it a new season, they'd have to renegotiate salaries. But if they call it a long season, they can actually, but they get twice the number of episodes. I don't know. There's all kind of reasons why they do these things, but clearly the idea, and we've said it so many times, is just, the conversation lasts longer than a few days. It lasts over a few months. The one thing that's different, though, is that people will still watch these shows at their own pace, or wait till they're over and then binge them. So you still feel like in this modern age, it's very difficult for there to be like a monolithic understanding of that quote unquote show that we're all watching. But if you are on Twitter and you do follow the people that kind of follow the things you follow, for instance, Peacemaker has had a huge presence on Twitter, and there's been constant, like the cast, everybody involved has been really active in terms of like, live tweeting episodes and all that kind of shit that makes you go, okay, there is clearly some kind of fandom that's growing week to week over something like this. You saw it a little bit with the Marvel shows. We've seen it with Mandalorian for sure. Just where there's this little sense of, oh yeah, people are waiting for this thing. So I don't know. I feel like it works for some things and not for others, maybe. But I also think when they want to give me a bunch of stuff at one time, like Ozark or Stranger Things, I kind of associate them with a binge. So I want that option. But as far as the economics of just breaking like Stranger Things or Ozark's last season into, I do think Netflix is trying to do a little bit of what you're saying, Ronald, is get back to that feeling of, people aren't just spinning through our stuff and viewing this as just library content on our site. They're actually trying to, the date starts to matter a little bit more. But I don't know. I mean, everybody, I do think I miss those days of feeling like, oh, everyone's been watching this, and you kind of know where everyone is in it, and you don't have to worry about spoiling weird shit for people, or people that are like, I'm waiting 5 years till it's over, and then I'm going to binge the whole thing. And it's like, all right, good luck.
Yeah. It's interesting, man. I'm super curious to see how Netflix adjusts, because they do seem to be pivoting in some ways. Like I said, the Kanye West Genius through, I think it's 2 or 3 parts. It started the other day, and I'm seeing people talk about it. The first episode is amazing. I don't know how you feel about this guy, I don't care, but if you watch it, this is unseen footage that's been sitting for 20 years. And to see this stuff, this young guy that's trying to make it in New York from Chicago, like going to these offices, like, hey, I made a song for Alicia Keys. Yeah, it's really cool to see a young kid walking around in a Def Jam office trying to get signed. And this conversation is going to go on for 3 more weeks, as opposed to just dropping it at the same time. And that's Netflix. So Netflix is trying it on some level. On something that's huge. This is one of the most popular dudes in the world. So
I feel like they need to do it. I feel like they need to do it.
I agree.
I mean, like, I definitely agree with John that like there are shows that I do feel like it is appointment. I am committed to binging this, because I do almost see it more like a theatrical experience where like it's the big opening weekend. It's going to burn bright. People are going to be talking about it like crazy. It'll be in the top, for a couple weeks, but like that's going to be the moment. And, as much as I value that, like, I just feel like the more and more I kind of commit to these weekly drops, and you're seeing it more and more across the different streamers that we always talk about. I'm definitely like feeling like I'm siding with that more and more as I get through shows, because I just like the idea of, being able to process some of the stuff, with a little more time between the episodes. But I just feel like, especially for their like these marquee shows, like you just hate to see like it just come and go, like Ozark is the example that comes to mind. Like I haven't watched it yet, but I just feel like, it came out like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I feel like there is no conversation around Ozark whatsoever anymore. And it happened in a week or 2, and then it's gone. And it's just kind of crazy to me. And I feel like maybe there's some sort of like tiering structure of like how they handle certain shows that really do have the power to keep Netflix in the conversation, or to keep people coming back to the platform every Friday to watch that episode of Stranger Things or whatever it might be. And while they're there, see the other stuff on Netflix, not just, always just randomly checking in to see what got dumped on Netflix on a Friday.
But
I don't know, there's got to be something there to that approach that would, just like, I don't know.
How you feel about the HBO Max thing? Like maybe Netflix can like 2 or 3 a week. Like, so you don't feel like, man, I'm only watching one episode. Like, give us 3 or something like that.
That's an approach that definitely works. Like most of these shows are doing that, like FX and Hulu and HBO Max. Like a lot of them are doing that 2 or 3 episodes, and then it goes to one, or then it goes to one. Like you kind of get that front loaded thing.
Yeah.
Or maybe do 2 a week, what like you're saying or whatever. But I don't know. I guess we'll see. I was going to say something when you mentioned. Oh, have I told you my Kanye story? I don't think I have ever.
No.
Dude, I hung out with Kanye West in the parking lot of Best Buy in Towson when I was in like college. So random, but like I was walking out of Best Buy. He was parked next to me. And like we just sat there and talked for like 5 minutes about what was going on. And he was like, I knew who he was. Just from his music kind of starting to break through, because I was at Towson and like you could tell that like people knew who he was, and like you started hearing more and more of his music.
Yeah.
And he was just basically like, yeah, I'm driving through. I'm stopping here to get a present for my mom for Christmas. And I was like, dude, I would love to get you to sign something. I can't believe I'm like literally talking to you in a parking lot of Best Buy.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I had nothing. So I took out $1 bill and he signed $1 bill, and I have it still. And like that became what I did when I would meet like certain musicians or artists that I love. I would have them sign like $1 bill. And that's what I started collecting after I saw him. And in the moment, just got like $1 bill signed by him. It was so weird.
How was he? Was he a nice guy?
He was very nice. He was very just, I mean, honestly, that at that point, I don't think he was the personality that he is now, or, as polarizing as he is now, or even just the artist that he would become 5 years later.
Yeah.
Because this was probably in like 2000, God, when would that have been? Early 2000s, 5, 8, or not even that late, actually. Maybe 2004, 5, 6.
Wow.
But, like nobody, like, I don't know, like, he was just breaking. And I was just like, is that Kanye West next to my car? And I was like, what the fuck? And it 100% was. And like, he was very nice, and just like, he was like joking. I think it was snowing that day when we were starting to snow. And he was like, I gotta get out of here before it gets crazy. I gotta get up to New York or whatever. And I was like, shit, man, good luck driving up in the snow. But he was nice. He was very nice. And it was like one of those weird moments where like, I remember like I called my then girlfriend. I was like, I just talked to Kanye West in the parking lot for like 10 minutes. Like, what did you do right in the last hour? And she's like, I'm sleeping. I was like, it was very cool. He was very nice. And, really cool. 4 years later, he like becomes like the biggest, artist out there. It was kind of bonkers, but
that's
just random, man. But yeah. Okay. That's my Kanye story. What else? Anything else to mention before we get into Peacemaker? I don't know. Yeah, let's go to Peacemaker, man. This is I mentioned this like last week, I think, or maybe it was when we were talking about the after party. Like, we are so fortunate and so thankful to be able to get screeners of shows. But goddamn, does it kill me? And this goes back to the streaming thing about like binging stuff. Sometimes they'll give us like 7 of 8 or 6 of 7, or, usually that last or the penultimate episode and the finale is kind of held back. But we talked about this, like going through this show so quickly when they gave it to us, a month and a half ago.
Yeah.
And to finally get back around to see the finale, I felt like as soon as it started and that intro kicked in with the opening credits with the music, like I was so happy to be watching the finale. Like Aaron and I both like just lit up. And like, she knows I don't skip those credits. I watched the entire thing, and I was just like, oh man, it's been like 5 weeks since I've watched this show, and I'm still so excited to watch this finale, you know? And so it was such a good feeling, like,
it was
as
crazy.
Frustrated as I was, it was great to finally be able to check it out.
It premiered on HBO Max, and then the nerve. I love you, HBO. And then I get a notification in the email. Oh, the 8th episode is now available.
In your screeners.
Come on, HBO.
I guess that's an automated thing that goes out, or maybe they really want to get, if you're on the press list, they want you to remember to give it press. Yeah, Steve, I was actually, I had to pick my son up. He has an art class that he goes to downtown after school on Thursdays. And I was picking him up bringing him home this evening, and I was telling him I had that like feeling of like when we're all going to see a movie. Yeah. And I just and I know that, and it's in my back pocket like all day when we're going to see one of these big movies that we're all looking forward to. And it's like then there's that moment where everybody's in the car and you pick them up and you're like, all right, we're going to the it's that happening. Feeling. Yeah. I had that feeling about coming home and watching a show this evening before we recorded, to watch that. So I definitely agree with you that it was exciting, and it being who it is, it's a guy who makes movies that we like, and it's a show that has held up week to week. And even upon closer inspection, I watched them just like you guys did when we first had access to the first 7. At the when we first saw the first one, we could watch the first 7, and then I watched it every week with my family after that. So I got to see not only did I try to make a note of like, oh, I'm seeing finished effects where before there were not always finished effects, but I was also seeing that feeling of like, yeah, this show really is holding up week to week. Like it really is a good show. Like that if you watch the show, there's only 1 or 2 weeks out of 8 that feel like moving characters into place for other things and don't feel like just an episode where something happens and it's almost not like a complete story. It was definitely a serialized sort of one big story stretched out, but there's this integrity to the individual episodes that you only get to experience if you have a week to think about it and look forward to the next one. And so I kind of enjoyed seeing my family go through that process of watching it, because it was like, oh yeah, this is what it would have been like had we not had access to all of them. That that you actually are going like, oh, I wonder, I hope Eagly doesn't die. Little things that I'm like, oh okay, well I kind of recognize more what James Gunn was doing with the format, which I think was really good. And I honestly will say this is one of the better. As far as even right up to the finale, it felt like a good television show finale, not a teeing up a movie or teeing up some other thing the way so many of these extensions of franchises the shows have. Even with loving them a lot of the time, that last episode feels like it's saying, and go to the theaters folks, or tune in next time. But this really felt like a TV show that was wrapping up a season, and I appreciated that. I appreciated that James Gunn made an honest go of like trying to make television, and I think he's excited about it. I think that we can expect more of this kind of this long form stuff from him and his people.
I was gonna say this show
see this Schmovie,
this show, WandaVision and Mandalorian are 3 things that I've seen that have kind of made me question the movie experience as a concept of like higher art versus television. I think we're getting to a point with some of these shows where the writing's just as good. The special effects are almost up to par, if not on par with most movies. Yeah. So, I'm watching this movie, Jesus, I'm watching this show and feeling the same feelings I would have felt in the movie theater, except, I could stretch my legs out a little more. I could throw a little more salt about popcorn from the seat that I'm in. It's just this show from week to week, like you were saying, John, just it was emotionally touching. It had some cool commentary on like, parenting and, kind of stepping away from a generation that you don't necessarily agree with. It was so well done that it shocked me, man. Like, not for a comic book show, for any show. It shocked me for any show. I teared up several times watching John Cena act his ass off. Like there was some parts
he's pretty great in it.
It challenged my whole idea about, I watch wrestling. I'm like watching John Cena do some of these things. I was like, man, like I get why James Gunn invested in him the way that he did. Like it didn't make any sense when I first heard it, but after watching, I'm like, holy shit, John Cena is incredible. He's incredible.
Yeah, 100%, Ronald. I had the same thought. I think we talked about it on the show, just wondering if John Cena was the ingredient we wanted to see James Gunn make a television show out of. And by the time, it didn't take till the end for me to think this, but definitely at the end, I kind of had the same thought of like, yep, I felt the same way after that Vacation Buddies movie, though. I was like, John Cena is starting to warm me up to his potential and the ways that he is actually more interested in being vulnerable than, say, The Rock or Maybe even, I don't know, like we're big fans of Dave Bautista, I think, on this podcast, and he's turned in some pretty interesting performances. I think John Cena might have that extra element of being able to handle the comedy in a way that kind of snuck up on me, honestly. Like he manages to weave it into whatever character he's playing, which is like good acting when the comedy comes from character and not, I mean, he's a little buffoonish, but it's more about just this character that we come to know. And so his reactions to things are funny because we've come to understand his psychology, and that's pretty good stuff, like that's what makes it feel like a good show and not just a cleaning up between movies kind of property for some giant franchise. It actually feels like it was allowed to have its own identity.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I feel like that's a big thing, like listening to him talk about why he wanted to do a Peacemaker TV series, and now I guess do 2 seasons of it at least, is because like it did seem like they were very much HBO, DC, like very much like do your thing, like do your own thing, go and do the show you want to do. There wasn't really any of those conversations about having to tie it into this or to make it lead to that. And that's something that you're right, I think you both have sort of mentioned it, is that I think that's what the show really benefits from like versus some of the Marvel series that we've watched on Disney Plus, which is that it's not caught up too much on referencing events from the movie that he did, or referencing events from other DC movies. It's got some fun winks and nods to characters and other elements of the DC universe. But I think the idea that he just kind of was able to make a story or show with a story and a narrative that like he just is so great at doing, like he's such a great storyteller. And he's kind of unique in the way that he does it, in the sense that like, he wrote all these episodes, but there's a couple different directors that did some of the episodes, but being able
Brad Anderson, did you notice he was one?
Yeah,
and directed Session 9 and other movies.
It's just cool that you can get those different like flourishes in some of the visual elements of the show, with it still being very consistent. But the most consistent thing is just that story. Like you don't feel like disjointed. You don't feel like it's separated in any way from episode to episode. And yeah, I mean, I definitely, to echo, kind of what you're both are saying, like I thought this show was incredible. Like I don't understand how it was as good as it is. I say that, but I'm not surprised, because like we all love James Gunn, and I think he's one of the best out there doing it, and he's kind of figured out how to do what he wants to do the way he wants to do it in these huge playgrounds. And I just think that his commitment to what he wanted to explore and do with the Peacemaker character is just so much him, and like this so like second tier thing that people probably would have looked past. And there's so much there to mine for emotional story and just narrative stuff that worked so well from episode to episode. And all the while bringing in additional characters that are either introduced in this series or we barely saw in Suicide Squad or anything else, and making them very interesting on their own, wanting to see more of them too in the second season, identifying, like, I fucking love Vigilante so much. That character is hilarious. And in some ways manages in certain sequences to upstage everybody else on the screen.
Yeah.
But just to be able to do that so efficiently in this series is just, he's amazing, man. I love James Gunn, and I'm glad that people really kind of have taken to the show and to him. It's sort of, especially because Suicide Squad didn't do, the business that they thought it could or should have done. It kind of, I remember he was on some podcast, I forget which one it was that I was listening to, and they were just very bluntly talking to him about it. And he was pretty open about, like, it was hard to see that, the movie not perform the way he thought it could or should, especially because, pretty much most people that saw it, like, at least very much liked it or loved it.
Yeah.
And, he had made a comment that, like, it was the most pirated movie, that year. And it's just like these things that are kind of stacked against you, not to mention the whole pandemic of it all and the day and date on HBO Max. But to know that you're committed to the story of this character and to kind of deliver so hard with this series is just impressive. I mean, honestly, and I don't think I know a person who's seen this show that doesn't really love it. Like, I don't think Aaron had any interest in this show at all when we started watching it. We first got our screeners, and she loved the show. Like, she was so pumped to watch this episode, and loved it as well. So I mean, I just think the ability to kind of like, that's just a testament to like being able to just grab somebody with a great story, interesting characters, no matter what world it's in, and that he does it so well.
He does.
And I can't wait to see more of this show. I can't believe it's as good as it is. I feel weird saying that, but just like, I should have never doubted him. And I didn't even doubt him, but I don't know. So it was like you said, Ronald, it was a weird announcement, like a Peacemaker series, huh? Like, especially with what happens in the show. I mean, in the movie. But man, I can't wait to see more of these characters, and just so good. Loved it.
I think I was openly disappointed when I, even after seeing the movie, I was like, and thinking John Cena was good in the movie, I was like still a little very suspicious about what this would be. But I'm kind of with you, Steve. Like, why would you not think James Gunn would have some sense of an idea, knowing that he could have taken any pieces from that to spin into a show? Right. Why would he have a terrible idea all of a sudden? And I don't mean that everything's been gold. I just mean, like, why would he be like, yeah, that's what I want to spend this much of my life on, and this many hours writing, and this. And I want to, maybe there's a couple of key things I want to mention here. One is, as good as these shows get, whenever they cut to a scene from one of the movies, that you can feel the extra little bit of budget put into a movie in terms of shooting it and lighting it and color correcting it and everything. It's one of the only things that they haven't quite matched up to yet. Like, but otherwise, I mean, I would say not just otherwise, even with that in consideration, that it still doesn't look quite as good as the movies do. It's one of the more consistent shows in terms of the quality of the fights and the action and even the CGI. I mean, there's some moments where it's obvious CGI, but it's usually incorporated in a pretty clever way. And I mean, James Gunn likes a gory battle. So it's like, I don't know. I felt like this was some of the better fight choreography and action I've seen from one of these shows that kind of fit into this subgenre that we're talking about.
I totally agree with you.
And the other thing is, we keep mentioning James Gunn. That's maybe the only thing to be a little nervous about, is that Peacemaker season 2, a story by James Gunn, written by Chet and Pete and Billy and Zoe. I mean, I'm just wondering, like, will other writers imitating the James Gunn style be anywhere near as charming as James Gunn is? Because there's a very specific thing he does and a very specific kind of joke that he does. Yeah. And I wonder about how much he's going to be able to do Peacemaker season 2 with the same attention to detail he was able to do the first one, given that we know that right now he's deep in Marvel world with Guardians 3. I'm just wondering, like, at what point is this guy that we love, like, is it possible for him to spread himself thin? The way that, like, if you look back, most of these creators that have had multiple shows, at some point they start pulling back and they stop, they quit the day-to-day supervision of some of this stuff. Do you trust the Peacemaker show and crew outside of the supervision of James Gunn, or do you think he is the ingredient kind of that brings it all together? And do you fear it all? Not so much fear. I mean, I think that he'll find a way to come up with something good, but do you know at all what I'm saying? That, like, it's you wonder how he's going to be able to do everything that his name is attached to at this moment.
Maybe he's
without farming it out.
I mean, at this point, maybe. The way that he spoke about writing, I remember when he first said, I wrote all the episodes already. It was like pretty early into lockdown. So it didn't feel like, I was like, what, how is this possible that he's written a whole season of a story arc? And then it happened. So, maybe I feel like he's trying to do what some directors do not want to do, which is basically make as much as shit as humanly possible until you can't really mine that information out of your head anymore. And I think that, like, he seems very precious with his writing and stuff, but not too precious that he can't produce more things. And I love that.
Maybe so. Maybe he can pull a few late nights and write Peacemaker season 2, and he's just that good.
I think so, honestly. Like, and I feel like, especially because in the announcement they said that he's writing and directing the second season of the show.
Oh, they did specifically say that. Okay.
They did. Okay. Yeah. So, and like, even his statement, like, in most of the pieces I read about it, he's just like, all over the idea of, like, this is one of the most fulfilling things I've ever done. Like, the fact that it's worked so well just makes me want to do it even more. and not even just with just Peacemaker. Like there's stuff talking about him doing other, possibly other DC series.
He has another show
HBO
lined
Max.
up that they haven't said what it is, but it's supposed to be different tonally. It's supposed to be like a less comedic, they said. But that's all they've said.
Yeah, I have no. I mean, yeah, I think he can do it, man. I mean, honestly, like he's kind of in the zone. It seems like he's kind of, in a different way, but similar to, like, Taika, has so many things going on, and like
good example
stuff he's writing, directing, producing. But it seems like for the most things that James Gunn is doing, with the exception of maybe a movie here or there that he maybe just produced, or they're usually something he's also had some writing credit on. But maybe not directed, but like that movie that came out like this with the kid who was like the villain origin story, basically. Remember that movie?
Yes.
Burn something? Was it something Burn?
I can't remember what it's called. But anyway, like, he produced it. I think he co-wrote it, but he didn't direct it. But like, he's got a lot of involvement in what he puts his name on. So I think, I look forward to seeing what he comes up with for season 2. And I think there's probably some really cool ideas out there.
Brightburn.
Right. I knew there was Burn in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool,
no, I did too. I knew that you were right, but I just didn't know which part it was.
I haven't seen Brightburn. I heard it was really good, and I like dark and weird, and I haven't seen it.
It is. I thought it was pretty good. I liked it. I don't think it's great or anything, but it's an interesting take on like a superhero / villain origin, like kind of, but in a like a horror movie type of thing. But yeah, I think it's pretty cool. It's got some pretty amazing. There's a couple really great sequences in it. But yeah, man, I don't know. I don't really have much else to say about Peacemaker outside of just well done, Mr. Gunn. Well done.
Yes. Thank you so much. I'm super satisfied with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Eagly looked really good. Like
Eagly looked
amazing.
so
they got up close to that eagle, and like in the early, I almost feel like the effects got better. Maybe it was just that those were things that continued to polish on the episodes that we first watched, because I had in my head that Eagly looked pretty good, and then watching it again the second time, I was like, oh, he actually looks way better than I thought. So maybe they did tinker with some of that like rendering on that character. But just what a great character. And I love how the finale answers some questions about Eagly that we may have been wondering. Just how much does Eagly understand? And we're led to believe maybe Eagly's understanding is much more pet-like and less like human-like. But okay, let's at this point, we've just recommended the show. Anyone at this point surely knows that we love it. I don't think we spoiled anything really yet. Let's talk a little bit about the outcome of this season before we wrap up the episode, just because I think there's a couple things that are worth observing about. One is, I think that here comes spoilers, folks. I think that James Gunn kills enough people that he knows that we know, and he wanted to do something he wanted to play with our emotions. And I think that the fact that just about every member of the team had are they going to die moment. I didn't really worry too much about Leota, and I didn't worry too much about well, obviously Peacemaker himself. I wasn't that worried about Vigilante for some reason, because he seemed like such a breakout character, but I also felt like James Gunn wouldn't not create a breakout character just because he intended to kill that character. Yeah, and I think James Gunn would know that 8 episodes is plenty of time to play with a D-list character from the comics like Vigilante. I mean, clearly someone he chose, all these characters are chosen because he can play around with them, right? So no one's safe. But I did start thinking, James Gunn, if he loves doing this show, maybe, I mean, now that there's a season 2, it makes sense that he would keep the team around. But going into this episode, I didn't feel like anybody was particularly safe, just because, I mean, again, there's one thing is like going forward with this family you've built, and the other thing is James Gunn's storytelling surprises. So yeah, everybody got a moment where it seemed like maybe they were a goner. Economos was probably one of the most convincing, because that sequence went on so long that it felt like they really had earned his death if it was going to happen. Yeah. But even then, I don't know. What did you guys think of those James Gunn surprises, and were you at all surprised that we really didn't lose anybody from the core group that now feels like the cast of the show going forward?
When one of the characters died that I was not expecting to die, that was inhabited by an alien being.
You could say we're spoiling.
Yeah, I mean, when that guy was killed,
Myrn.
when Myrn was killed, Who's gonna be a villain in Guardians? Isn't he gonna be a villain in Guardians?
Yeah, James Gunn did that thing he likes to do. He figured out he likes this actor, and he put him in his next big project in a big role. You know, it is great.
Mern was so good, man, and you know, it was so weird about it. It was, you know, they established that he was being inhabited by a butterfly, you know, and that he wasn't quite human anymore. And when he died, I still felt it, like really felt it. That scene where that just kind of like, in just out of the way of seeing him die. And they
it was like putting the gun on him and like shooting 3 or 4 times into his chest, like at close range. That was brutal. That was
seeing
brutal.
them jump in the other space, and seeing Harcourt start to cry, essentially, just kind of knelt down trying to hide from this dangerous presence. I felt it, man. I felt every bit of it. So if he could do that with a guy that clearly wasn't meant to be there forever, good Lord, man. Like,
well, also he has the double death of then the good-natured butterfly crawls out of him and gets mashed up, and then gets to die again later when they find him, and he's still got a little hand to reach out. I think that's James Gunn knowing that that's him almost being malicious with our heartstrings with that little insect guy. But I think the thing about Mern was he was an example of sort of the butterfly experience. He got to talk a little bit about it, which let us know that the memories of the person are still in there somewhere, kind of tormenting. So there's the possibility of coming back, maybe with some supernatural intervention, but basically you're gone once you're possessed by one of these things. Right. That's why even watching those cops, the kind of bumbling cops got was a little bit sad, because we liked them. We liked their energy. They were real characters, and then they died. But no, I thought that was a brilliant thing. Like the way that Mern's death really did show you that, okay, maybe he was the most likely to die, but it also opens up this possibility that maybe this whole team isn't going to make it out of this mission.
Yeah.
Mern related. I love the scene where Harcourt finds out that Ayobayo is the daughter. Yeah, how am I not pronouncing it? The daughter of Viola Davis's character, and she's like, "Did you know that he's a fucking?" She's like, "Yeah, I know." Mern's like, "I know that she was."
Yeah,
I love that, man. I loved how.
You think I didn't do a background check on anybody I welcome to my team?
Right.
God, man, just
you got one over on him. You think he
delivered those?
Well, he also had those lines that hinted at like the fact that the guy that he possessed was not a very good guy. And I love that. His realization that when he contacted one of that guy's friends to get to be their man on the inside, and that was that guy Locke, who turned out to be like the crooked sheriff, and then the butterfly sheriff.
Very scary face.
I love the way though that you see the realization on his face when he realizes that the guy that was friends with the guy that he's inhabiting is not a good guy, like that he realized when he says, "Oh, he's our man on the inside," and he said he's a psychopath. They lingered on Mern's face. It was just a nice little moment where you realize that the butterfly inside him is going, maybe he's not a good guy, like maybe I trusted the wrong guy. I don't know. I just thought that was a neat little, because that story with line, you almost had to piece it together, because when we first meet Locke, we don't know why he's talking to Mern, and you almost have to, I don't know, you have to have a good memory for faces to pick up on when he shows up later as the cop that he's the plant. But he's a plant from a hero friend of ours who is also potentially part of this other thing because he's a butterfly. I just feel like, again, it was set up like a good TV show. I think James Gunn actually, he gave all of these minor characters something to make you remember them. And every actor, I always think in his movies or his shows now, it seems like people get something fun to do, even if your character's not going to be much and you're going to die, like the cops. They got fun stuff to do. So I think that's just a sign of how much he cares about characters, and probably how much he cares about actors too.
Yeah.
So I guess the other big thing is there's a big moment at the end, with bigger DC heroes, we should say, which might be one of the things that James Gunn was worried about being spoiled by releasing this episode. So he did not want it to come out until it was going to officially drop. What did you think of the appearance of basically the Justice League in some shape or form?
I thought it was cool, man.
Yeah, it's cool, man. And especially because you have the scene where she calls in the favor to mom, hey, can you just send the Justice League?
Yeah.
It's like, do you have time? No, I don't. And that's like, I feel like, I that's another James Gunn thing, I think, is, there's the full circle of that joke the whole season about Aquaman having sex with fish. I just think that lands well, especially, when Flash kind of is in on the joke.
Or at least seems to think it's true. Like that's what I ended that going like, was Flash giving him a hard time, or does Flash think it's true?
Right. It was a fun scene. I thought it was really kind of it's one of those weird things, like where we're watching it and like, you have the wide shot, you can tell it's like not them in the wide shot at the shot with them. When you have your close-up coverage and it's like, oh, there's Jason Momoa and Ezra Miller, and you're like, oh, cool. And you have just like the shadowy figures of like Wonder Woman and Superman. It's like, oh, production, It's
What do you say? Took you long enough, dickheads, or something like that? When he saw him, I thought that was
you're
great.
Late. You're late or whatever. No, that was a cool scene. It was like I do like how like it didn't really rely on any kind of special big surprise cameo to have any impact on their story.
Yeah,
exactly.
But more of a like, oh yeah, Amanda Waller could get the Justice League to show up there, but they'd be 5 minutes too late, or whatever. Okay.
Well, and it's like, I mean, you kind of said this, Steve. This is like almost a plot hole people try to address in these movies. They're always saying, well, why don't all the other heroes know about this?
Exactly.
But I love also the way that feeds into the story of Peacemaker. It's like, as a hero, this is kind of like a moment for him. You know what I mean? Like he was there, and they all got to see that he was doing the right thing in that moment. So it's a little bit of his redemption story is kind of being broadcast. But I think what's interesting too is that all of that happened to pay off the Aquaman fucks fish joke. That's the reason that they're there. They're really not there, as you said, to save the day or come in, and so they don't affect the story. They're purely to be part of the joke. Right. And I thought that, I mean, that's one thing I guess you just want to say. DC is fine with James Gunn messing around with, they also sort of seem to establish that Green Arrow is a brony.
And they also had what was the Superman thing they said a couple episodes ago? There was a Superman joke too. That
does he have like? It might have been really like if he's got like a fecal fetish or something like that.
Yes, it was something weird like that. Yeah, like something brutal. Yeah.
Great show.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Oh man, so that's all on HBO Max now. If you haven't watched any of it or you're catching up, definitely check out the finale. Or if you haven't started Peacemaker, highly recommend it across the board. I think from the podcast, I think we've all really enjoyed this show. So
were you emotional watching the opening sequence just one last time? When it started the last time,
God,
I tried to pay extra attention to it one last time.
Better yet, I was like emotional when they did their walk up and the song played.
Yeah,
like too. when they did the walk up to the barn in like slow motion, and it's that song. I was like, and then when they start changing the key of the song when people start getting hurt, I'm like, oh, fucking James Gunn, man, he's good. Taking that song that I love and you're putting it in this like epic hero thing, and then it's just going wrong. It's like, no. But yeah, it's great. That song is definitely in rotation on my Spotify.
It's a great song.
Oh man. So what else have you guys watched? Mention a couple things before we wrap this up. I know we kind of had a couple titles that we each wanted to mention briefly.
I just want to mention, okay, so I'm getting into physical media. In the wake of the announcement of the Viola Davis movie, The Woman King, is coming out. Gina Prince, what is that? By the Wood. What an interesting last name. I love it. Her old movie, Love and Basketball, the Criterion Collection.
Nice.
So
good.
I have a copy of this, a digital copy of this, and it's a 4K intermediate, 5.1 DTS mix, uncompressed sound, pumping through. So
pump it.
I can't go downstairs right now because my wife is pregnant, gonna give birth very soon. This is the first time I've ever said this on the podcast. But so I got a nice setup upstairs so that she didn't have to walk around. So I have this cool Vizio soundbar that has like Atmos. When Atmos comes on, it flips up and shoots the sound around. And then I have two in the back and a huge subwoofer that rocks the floor. She fucking hates it. And we wound up watching Love and Basketball on Valentine's Day. So for anybody that hasn't seen this movie, it's just a beautiful story about two people that love basketball and each other. There's nobody dies, nobody gets stabbed,
Spoiler alert.
it's just a love story that is so cool and
No
woven.
cancer.
No cancer.
No cancer.
Nobody, no parents die. And it's just if you want to watch a cool, it's not a rom-com, but it has like comedic elements in it with a lot of heart. I would absolutely suggest this movie, man. Loving Basketball is like one of my favorite films. And this Criterion Collection stuff is just, it's remastered to perfection. It has a lot of extra features. I think, this is the beginning of my physical media journey. And this is the first one. This is the first one. I want to start trying to talk about more of these things as we go along. And maybe they can start sending us stuff. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, Loving Basketball. What about you guys?
I was going to just go through a couple real quick. I wanted to mention the biggest thing I watched that I loved, and it's a docuseries on HBO Max. It's called 100-Foot Wave.
Okay.
It's basically, I think it's a 6-part docuseries, basically about Garrett McNamara, who is like a legendary big wave surfer. If you've ever seen like documentaries like Riding Giants and, some of these big wave docs, he's always mentioned. He's like a legend. But this documentary series is basically about him, his career of chasing the 100-foot wave, and it takes place over his life. But it's amazing how much footage they've had over the past like 15 and 20 years. Basically the discovery and like kind of cultivation and following that Nazare has developed, which is the beach, the surf that he found in Portugal, that over the past like 10 years has become like a mecca of big wave surfing. And at the time was like an untapped thing, like no one knew about it. And they were all surfing out of Hawaii, and that's where everything was. Jaws was the big break. And, a fan, somebody he had corresponded with, told him about this, these swells in Nazare. And, eventually he went there to see them, and basically kind of completely transplanted his life there for the better part of a decade to develop safety protocol and to develop a team and to basically live there and to develop a community around this beach, and to help the local community and to create a surf culture there and an economy there that never existed. It's just an incredible documentary series. And again, I love these documentary series, these docs about like the big wave surfing or just surfing in general. And the characters, the surfers, the professionals, the families, how it affects all that stuff. And specifically the big wave surfing, it's so dangerous and so risky and such a, it's like these thrill seekers, and it's just like these adrenaline junkies, and you can kind of watch him and just question like, oh my God, why? Why are you surfing 70, 80, 90-foot waves? Especially when you see the damage that it does to people and to your bodies and to you mentally. But that is on HBO Max. And again, I can't recommend that enough. It's one of the better things I've seen so far this year. Just kind of plowed through that over the past couple of days. Also checked out Zachary Levi's American Underdog, which is like based on a true story of Kurt Warner, Hall of Fame quarterback for the Rams and the Cardinals. Pretty cookie cutter, pretty standard biopic. But I like Zachary Levi, so I thought I'd check it out, and I thought it was pretty good. Just a great story of just like, not to sound silly, but like an underdog, just like I'm always in for the underdog story, no matter what it is referenced or framed around. So to see, somebody kind of overcome these things is just really inspiring. The movie's kind of, I don't know, it feels kind of cheap in certain areas, but it's a smaller production. It's not like some big budget movie, but I thought it was pretty good. And then what was the other thing that I said I wanted to mention? 100-Foot Wave, American Underdog. Oh, and the other Netflix has Ali Wong's new comedy special, Don Wong. And like, let me just say, I love Ali Wong. I've seen her a couple times. Her first special specifically is like one of my favorites, and I think she's hilarious. I did not find this new special funny or enjoyable that much at all. I mean, there's a couple great jokes in it that really do work, but overall, I just felt like, I don't know, I felt like she took a sharp turn in being like extremely vulgar and like just like sexual for no reason, for no purpose of a joke. Like it was weird. Like it just feels so different than her other two specials, like the whole way through, you know, where I feel like the other specials, like that approach was peppered throughout the show. And even when I saw her in DC, like it was such a great balance of the stuff that I love about comedy and stand-up comedy. But this special, I don't know, man, it just felt different to me. And I've been seeing some reviews and people's, you know, some friends that have seen it, like kind of sort of similar response to it. So I'm curious, like, I don't know, kind of disappointed by it, to be honest with you. I was very excited to watch it, and we watched it, you know, this week. It came out on Valentine's Day. Again, there's a couple really great jokes in it, and I don't think it's like horrible by any means. But I think just because I really like her so much, I was just disappointed by it a little. But if you like her, maybe you would enjoy it. I mean, it's her third special on Netflix, and it's out on there now. It just came out this week, so it's called Don Wong. And I think that was really the only other ones I wanted to mention. Yeah. What about you, John? Anything you want to bring up real quick?
Yeah, I guess I want to mention something that comes out today for everyone. The first 2 episodes of the Ben Stiller directed kind of sci-fi-ish series Severance. That's on Apple TV Plus, and it's it's a very slow-paced show. It took me a couple times to get through the first episode at first, just because it was like I would be putting it on late at night, and it just has these kind of long scenes, and it really is drawing out like these moments where you're following people down these hallways and around this structure. I think it's meant to give you a feel. As the show goes along, you see why you need maybe this intro to this kind of otherworldliness of this place, this kind of clean, almost, you know, alien atmosphere of this place.
Yeah.
But the basic idea is there's an organization where it's like they provide a service of allowing you to bifurcate your mind between your work and your life. So when you go to work, spatially, something in that building makes you go wakes up a personality that only has memories formed in that place. And then when you leave that place, all the memories from that place go away, and only the memories you formed outside that place come in. And it's like only when you're starting to watch the show, I mean, it starts to get into this suggestion that the reason they do that is because of what's going on in this place, that they don't want people that are doing the work to be like tortured maybe by the memories of what they've done, or to even be able to talk about what they're doing outside the building. It very quickly kind of like that concept, which I remember was in the trailer, of splitting your mind between work and life. I was like, oh, that sounds like a high concept thing. But this very, like within the first episode, you start to get a feel for how this feeds into like a suspense thriller, a little bit of, like I said, science fiction stuff creeping in, almost some kind of horror elements. The first 2 episodes are coming out today. I've watched a few, but you know, I'm definitely interested. I'm going to finish it as soon as I can. It's really well done. I do think the pace of it, again, it might be prohibitive if you're not going to just really lock in and kind of enjoy the atmosphere of this, because everything's a little bit heightened and a little bit arched. Like Patricia Arquette is a major character, and, you know, her performances can be very mannered, and her style of delivering dialogue is very like slow and deliberate. So I don't know. It's not like a super showy thing, but it is, you know, just the camera work and the angles and things that they choose. You can tell that they're going for something, you know, like off-putting. They're trying to keep you off balance with the sort of photography it is, but it's very stately. And I think, you know, Ben Stiller tends to make nice things. I don't always love his directorial efforts, but he doesn't phone it in at all. So I don't know. I think it's a really interesting show. And like I said, I would love to know more about, I wish I'd been able to watch them all so I could speak to just the general quality of the thing. But as far as like, does the concept start to pay off in terms of the situations it puts the characters in, it very quickly got me to realize, oh, I can see how this can be a you know, something that'll keep me hanging on. Because there's this whole thing of people that know you at work that don't know you outside, and vice versa. I don't know. It's an interesting, it starts to present entanglements pretty quickly that I want to see. So people should probably check that out. If that sounded interesting. And then there's a movie on HBO Max, I think. Is that where Kimi is?
Yeah.
It's the new Steven Soderbergh flick, and it is you know, I mean, it's kind of in line with the sort of stuff he does. He's another guy that doesn't make just crappy films or anything, but he kind of works fast, and you get a sense of like what excited him about an idea. And his casts are always colorful and interesting. And there's a couple of sort of surprise people that pop up in cameos in this. that feed into that thing of Steven Soderbergh sort of casting comedians in minor characters, something he seems to like to do, even if it's not a comedy. But this is really about Zoe. Is it Zoe or Zoe in this case?
Zoe
Kravitz.
Zoe.
Zoe Kravitz is really, really great. She really carries this thing. It's a little bit of a Rear Window update. There's a housebound person who doesn't want to leave their apartment, but it's one of the first things I've seen that answers the question I've had of just when am I going to see a movie that takes place post-pandemic, but not like not about pandemic, but just our characters are popping on masks and stuff. And you see people wearing masks in the street and people are just living in that world. And they're referring to lockdown. They're referring to like things that happened when everyone's been sitting at home. But you can see how pandemic feeds into and lockdown feeds into like a Rear Window type scenario really easily if everyone's kind of staying in their homes.
Right.
I know there's some really beautiful photography in this. I noticed. I mean, it's that crisp, super clean digital photography, but there were some really nice colors. And again, I think about these things when I watch a Soderbergh movie because I know that he is very interested in like those aspects, those formal aspects of putting together a movie. And this movie has that kind of flash that his films can have. I didn't love it overall, but by the time it gets to the end, there's actually there's like a pretty good suspense sequence that wraps it up. And you feel like you saw something that was pretty cohesive and well done. So, I think I guess I would recommend it. It's only 90 minutes. That's another thing that sort of, thank goodness, a new movie that it's only 90 minutes long. You don't see that very often. And the fact that it's on HBO Max, I think it's a real easy sell to check this one out. But yeah, it's not without little story issues. And I don't like to pick on plot holes, but I thought of a few while I was watching this just by accident. So, I don't know if that's a great sign. I enjoyed it though. I thought it was good. It's like a B movie. It's like a solid B movie from some really talented people.
Gotcha. I had to check it out. Oh, I forgot to mention one more thing. Aziz Ansari's nightclub comedian special. So the concept is he wrote a couple jokes and then performed them the same night. It's a half an hour long. I loved it. I mean, because I really didn't like the one after he had the big controversy. I was a little afraid once he started going casual clothes. When he went from suit to casual clothes, he got weird. But he's in casual clothes in this one, and it's really good. It has a lot of heart. It's about COVID and stuff, but it's not as hard on people in this one. But it does really talk about the absurdity of everything that's happening. It's really well written with a lot of care on the subject of COVID and masks and vaccines. It's just done really well. So Aziz Ansari, nightclub comedian. Check it out if you like Aziz Ansari.
Didn't you want to mention Bel-Air?
Oh my God, Bel-Air. Bel-Air, based on a short that came out, about 3 years ago. It was a drama. It was a piece that was about 5 minutes. It was a dramatized version of Bel-Air. Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Will Smith saw it and developed it into a show. It went to one place that we shall not name, and then Peacock picked it up. And I had the privilege of Peacock sent us all of the episodes, or most of the episodes. I watched the first 4. The first 4 should be accessible by the time you hear this. It is one of the best updates to a concept that I've ever seen. It takes a lot of unanswered questions that existed in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. For example,
oh my God.
How did his mom feel about him going to LA? And we only saw her like twice. They addressed that stuff. And, why would a person go to LA after getting in one little fight? This fight in this case involved a gun. and getting arrested by cops and just it makes a lot of sense. And as silly as it sounds to dramatize something like this, there's no reason why some of the stuff should have been as light as it was in the original version. These are all questions I've had at some point during the course of the original show. It's a little more vulgar, but Carlton, Hillary, and Will, and Uncle Phil's like this bald heartthrob, which is really Jeffrey is like a very cool, smooth dude too. it's very weird to see these like beautiful people playing the counterparts, and they were beautiful too. Don't get me wrong, the original counterparts, but this is a very solid introduction to this drama version of Will Smith's Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Might have something to do with him. He oversaw it. He produces the show as well. It really pays a cool homage to Philly. A lot of Philly references, and seeing Jazz and Will in this is pretty amazing. And the guy that plays Will Smith is, I don't know, man. It's not exact, but there's something about him that feels like the spirit of Will Smith. I don't know how else to describe it, but that he's a tall, handsome dude that's very charismatic, but in a very different way than Will Smith. But it feels like the spirit of the show. So, I mean, if anybody wants to see a dramatized version of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and doesn't mind profanity, because it's not quite a sitcom in the same way that the original was. It's a cool ass show, man. It's a cool show that looks really beautiful. So.
I think it's an interesting thing because it sounds so much like it could also have been a Saturday Night Live sketch to say we're going to do a trailer for a serious version of Fresh Prince, you know, and then it's interesting that they actually, but I mean, when I heard they were developing it, it was like, well, clearly they're going to put it through the paces of whatever they do to develop a drama. They're not going to say, let's do the cheesy version, but it is a funny thing. It still feels like a parody to do like the serious version of something that was essentially, you know, that show had heavy themes on it, but all sitcoms had those heavy episodes. It was a pretty light-hearted show. The other thing is, does this not feel like it's just, you know, you can see those trends coming? Like if this takes off and people love it, think of all the sitcoms that are going to get like reimagined as like the dramatic potential of them. I mean, they already did something different with the reboot of Saved by the Bell. It's not like dramatic or anything, but it's made with an eye towards like breaking the mold a little bit, you know? So it's like, they don't have to be sacred if they can get that thing. So it did make me think in a couple of years, are we going to be looking at more, or just see them coming, or what, of these kind of like dramatic reboots of comedic materials? It seems like you could go in the other direction. You could do the spoof comedy that's like a reboot of something like Starsky and Hutch type thing. That we've seen a million times, but you don't see a lot of people saying, oh, this was a comedy and now we're going. It almost seems like inherently you have to scale the usual heights a drama has to scale, but then actually go higher, because you also have to make people not think they're watching the serious quote unquote version of something silly. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't know. It's an interesting challenge, but it definitely doesn't look like a sitcom. And if I didn't know that it was connected, there's really not much visually to connect. Like when I saw the trailer, I was like, oh, this looks like just a show they would make. It doesn't look like it has to be resting on this association with an old show at all. So I wonder what that's like to someone who is a religious viewer of that show to then see, I'm sure, all the Easter eggs and references and characters that must pop up.
Show maybe 10, 15 times all the way through. And I can tell you that, I mean, I wasn't too upset when they said they were going to make a show about it. There's so many Easter eggs. It's crazy. And they do it in a really cool way. Like, yeah, it's worth checking out for anybody. That I think Riverdale was the first serious version of a thing. I was like, yeah. Riverdale is it. Like,
but even that's campy.
Yeah.
That's like heightened and kind of campy. Bel-Air looks like it's a legit drama. I don't know. It doesn't look like it's trying to be a spoof of anything.
Right. Yeah. So we'll see. I think it's a great show, man.
Cool. And that's on Peacock, right?
Peacock, yes, every Thursday, and I think they have 2 or 3 more episodes to go, but it's a great show.
Cool.
Yeah, cool.
All right, well, that's a lot.
We jam.
We'll probably have a recap or some sort of, like, you can make sure you catch all this. If you go to our YouTube, you know, you definitely see our little
timestamps.
The timestamps, so you can, like, you know, find what you want to listen to. If that's a perk and benefit of subscribing to the YouTube and turning on notifications so you get those alerts when these new episodes drop. But there's a lot of different properties across a lot of different platforms that we just discussed, but the bulk of this episode we discussed Peacemaker. That's on HBO Max. And if you have any questions about where to find something, if we mentioned it and didn't clarify, definitely comment. If you follow us on Facebook, you can stream the podcast directly from there. If you follow our Facebook page, just facebook.com/movie schmovie. And if you comment asking, we'll definitely let you guys know where you can find it. Or you can just comment if you saw something that we didn't mention that you think we need to check out if you liked it. It would love to engage, love to comment back and forth, just kind of see what everybody's checking out. because we definitely don't see everything, and I'm sure we've missed something that's pretty great. So let us know what it is if we haven't talked about it yet. You can also go to movieschmovie.com and subscribe to the podcast. Any platform that we are on is all linked directly there, and you can even listen to it directly on that site if you want to. That option's there as well. But we'll be back in a couple of weeks. We're gonna have an episode. We're gonna do a little bit of a preview on this year's South by Southwest Festival, which the film portion of it, we're fortunate once again to be able to participate in. So we'll be checking out a bunch of stuff, and we're going to go and do an episode where we kind of like just bullet point a couple of these films that are being showcased there that we're looking forward to the most, each of us. That'll be out in a couple of weeks. And then I guess at the other end of that, we'll be back in a bit. We're going to have a little bit of a break coming up here.
People might know why if they've listened carefully to this episode.
Like, yeah, if you listen to what Ronald said, you know why. There's going to be a child coming into this world, and they're going to spend a lot of time loving that little thing. So we're going to give him all the time he wants, and as long as he continues to send us pictures and let us know how everything's going, we'll be okay with that. But yeah, we're going to try to bank some stuff and have some stuff ready on the other side of his just amazing event that's coming into his life. But we'll check out some stuff at at South by Southwest, and be sure you know what we watch, because later this year you'll probably see a lot of the stuff from that festival coming out in theaters or on different platforms that we talk about, streaming platforms. But again, a couple weeks we'll have a preview episode for South by, and then a little bit after that we'll kind of recap what we actually got to see and let you know what the standouts were. You guys have anything else you want to mention? Are we good to go?
Good to go.
All right,
there's no wrong time to rock.
That's also very true. As always, thanks for listening. You made our day. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.